You've done this before. You were on a diet, cut out sweets, added movement. The scale went down, 10 kilograms. That's a real result that happened. And then life took over. Holidays, stress, work trips, just fatigue from restrictions. And a few months later, you're standing on the same scale with the same numbers, as if nothing had happened. Today, as a nutritionist, I'll explain why weight returns, even in those who did everything right, and what needs to change in your next attempt so the results stick. Let me start with the feeling that everyone who's been through this knows. You lost weight. It wasn't easy. Several months of discipline, of saying no, of effort. You saw results in the mirror, heard compliments, felt better, and at some point, you allowed yourself a little more. That was normal. You can't live forever in strict restriction mode. And then you suddenly notice. Beloved jeans are tight again. The scale shows 3, 5, 8 kilograms more. And confusion, because you didn't actually eat that much. Seemingly return to your normal diet, but the weight is coming back faster than it left. This is one of the most painful experiences in the weight loss topic. Not the weight loss itself, but losing the result. Because it comes with a very specific feeling. You already knew what it was like to weigh less. And now you're not just where you started, you're where you started and you also know what you've lost. There are several typical scenarios I observe in practice. First scenario. Strict diet with good results and an abrupt exit. The person ate very restrictively for 6 months, lost weight, then decided now it's okay, and returned to previous eating. Weight came back in 2 to 3 months, sometimes with a small bonus. Second scenario, stable result for several months, then stress or life changes. A new job, moving, a difficult period in relationships, and habits collapse. Food becomes a source of comfort, less movement, worse sleep, weight returns. Third scenario, the person did everything right, counted calories, moved, didn't break. But weight returned gradually and almost imperceptibly, as if the body quietly compensated every deficit. In all 3 cases, different circumstances, but the same physiological mechanism. And exactly this explains why just eat less and move more is an insufficient strategy for long-term weight maintenance. I say this not to devalue discipline and effort. A diet is a necessary first step, but the first step is not the whole journey. Stable weight requires different, deeper metabolic work. That's what today's conversation is about. There's one more moment that needs to be said aloud. Weight return is not personal failure and not weakness of character. It's a physiologically predictable response to weight loss. About 80 to 85% of people who lose weight regain it within 2 years. Not because they're all lazy or lack willpower, but because the body actively works to return to its habitual weight. And without understanding these mechanisms, any diet is only a temporary solution. This statistic is not to discourage. It's to change the approach. If the overwhelming majority of people regain weight, then the standard approach to weight loss only works halfway. A different strategy is needed for the second half of the task. Maintenance. Now, the mechanism. I'll explain as a nutritionist, specifically and systematically. Let me start with a concept that explains almost everything. It's called the weight set point. The body perceives a certain weight as normal and actively tries to return to it, up or down. This point isn't fixed forever. It shifts with prolonged lifestyle changes. But it's inertial. It requires time and the right conditions to reset. When you lost weight in a few months, the body hasn't yet reset its set point. It perceives the new weight as a temporary deviation and works to return to the familiar one. First mechanism, hormonal restructuring during and after weight loss. With weight reduction, leptin levels fall. The hormone signaling the brain stores are sufficient. This happens proportional to the loss of fatty tissue. After weight loss, leptin remains suppressed significantly longer than the weight itself stays at the new level. The brain receives a chronic, stores are depleted signal, intensifies appetite, reduces energy expenditure. How long does it take for leptin to normalize? According to various data, from several months to a year and more with stable new weight. This means that for hormonal hormonal reprogramming, not only reaching the new weight is necessary, but maintaining it long enough. That's exactly why holding on for a year after achieving the goal is a principled milestone. Simultaneously, ghrelin rises, the hunger hormone. After weight loss, its levels remain above normal for months. A person is objectively hungrier with the same nutrition that existed before weight loss. This isn't weakness of will, this is hormonal pressure. Cortisol under dietary stress rises. It stimulates fat deposition in the abdominal area, the most quickly returning fat after a diet. Second mechanism, metabolic adaptation and memorized metabolism. With weight reduction, basal metabolism decreases disproportionately strongly, stronger than one would expect simply from body mass loss. This is called adaptive thermogenesis. Studies show that after losing 10% of body weight, the body reduces caloric expenditure by an additional 300 to 400 kilocalories per day beyond what is explained simply by smaller body mass. This effect persists for years after weight loss, meaning a person who lost weight from 80 to 70 kilograms spends fewer calories per day than a person who has always weighed 70 kilograms. This became known thanks to the famous study of participants in the American TV show Biggest Loser. 6 years after participation, their metabolism remained significantly reduced compared to the norm for their actual weight. Some regained weight despite continuing efforts. This case showed rapid extreme weight loss creates metabolic consequences that persist for years. This explains return to previous eating and weight went back up. The previous diet now creates a surplus where before it was maintenance. Third mechanism, fat cell memory. This is a discovery of recent years that radically changed the understanding of weight regain. Fat cells, adipocytes, don't disappear during weight loss. They shrink in size, and they retain memory of their maximum size at the level of epigenetic changes. Genes responsible for fat accumulation remain activated. At the first opportunity, with caloric surplus, these cells fill up faster than in a person who never gained that much. That's why weight returns faster than it left. The body returns to a familiar state, not mastering a new one. This fat cell memory is one of the explanations for why people who've been through several cycles of gain-loss gain faster each time. Their fat cells are more experienced. They remember maximum size and strive for it at the first opportunity. Fourth mechanism, insulin resistance as an unfinished problem. Disrupted insulin sensitivity, one of the main factors in both weight gain and its return. With insulin resistance, cells respond more poorly to insulin. The pancreas produces more of it. High insulin blocks breakdown of fatty tissue and stimulates its accumulation. A person can maintain a caloric deficit and still accumulate fat in some places while losing muscle mass in others. With a diet, insulin resistance decreases somewhat, but if the diet was based only on caloric deficit without work on glycemic load, the decrease is incomplete. After exiting the deficit, insulin levels rise again. Fat cells begin filling up. Meanwhile, the person may eat normally and still gain. A practical self-test for insulin resistance. If strong hunger, especially craving for sweets or flour, appears 2 to 3 hours after a full meal, this is a sign of unstable glycemic response. Not a diagnosis, but a reason to get fasting insulin and HOMA-IR tested. Fifth mechanism, fatty tissue inflammation. Fatty tissue is not a passive reservoir. It's an active endocrine organ that, when in excess, begins producing pro-inflammatory substances, cytokines, adipokines. This creates chronic low-grade inflammation. Inflamed fatty tissue is fatty tissue with disrupted regulation. It responds more poorly to satiety signals, regulates appetite more poorly. Even with weight loss, fatty tissue continues releasing pro-inflammatory substances for some time, and this is one of the factors that maintains cravings for overeating and makes it difficult to maintain new weight. That's exactly why weight loss is not just less fat. It's reduction of the inflammatory background, improvement of insulin sensitivity, normalization of hormonal signals. But all these processes require time, significantly more than weight loss itself on the scale. This is exactly why fatty tissue inflammation is one of the factors supporting the tendency to overeat and complicating maintenance. Now, about mistakes. The most typical strategies that lead to weight return. Mistake 1, go on the same diet again. It worked last time, means it'll work again. But each cycle of sharp weight loss and gain worsens metabolic adaptation. After the second diet, the body adapts faster. After the third, even faster. Metabolism becomes more economical with each cycle. A maximally similar diet gives a smaller result each time, and increasingly rapid weight return afterward. Mistake 2, consider weight maintenance a matter of willpower. I'll just control myself always. But with reduced leptin, nutrition, elevated ghrelin, and adapted metabolism, this is a battle with hormonal physiology. Will is an important tool, but without normalizing metabolic markers, insulin resistance, inflammation, hormonal balance, will exhausts over time. This isn't weakness, it's physiology. Mistake 3. Abruptly exit the diet. Reach the goal. Now I can be normal. Abrupt return to previous eating is the quickest condition for weight return. Metabolism is adapted to deficit. A sharp increase in caloric intake creates a large surplus, even with normal eating. The correct exit from a diet is gradual caloric increase, by 100 to 150 kilocalories per week over several weeks. This process is called a reverse diet. It's psychologically uncomfortable. It seems need to eat more, contradicts the logic of weight loss. But exactly this allows metabolism to adapt to the new weight, not to the deficit. Skipping this step is the main cause of rapid weight return in people who did everything right. Mistake 4. Not working with insulin resistance. This is the most common unclosed problem with weight return. A person loses weight through caloric deficit, and this gives results on the scale, but insulin resistance with this only partially normalizes. After exiting the deficit, high insulin again works against fat burning. Without specific work on glycemic response, through nutrition, through the right nutrients, this problem isn't solved by caloric deficit alone. That's why eating with a low glycemic index works for weight maintenance better than simply eating less. Not because calories don't matter, but because with disrupted insulin sensitivity, the type of calories affects metabolism just as much as their quantity. 100 kilocalories of white bread and 100 kilocalories of buckwheat with vegetables give fundamentally different insulin responses and fundamentally different consequences for weight maintenance. Mistake 5. Ignoring fatty tissue inflammation. Chronic inflammation is one of the main factors maintaining cravings for caloric food and disrupting appetite regulation. It can't be closed with just a diet. Systematic work is needed. Anti-inflammatory nutrition, fatty fish, olive oil, leafy greens, turmeric, adequate sleep, reducing cortisol, and specific nutrients with proven anti-inflammatory action on fatty tissue. There's a simple marker that shows systemic inflammation level, high sensitivity C-reactive protein. This is a regular blood test. If elevated with normal weight, inflammation is present. If elevated with excess weight, this is exactly fatty tissue inflammation. Reduction of this marker when working with weight, a good prognostic sign of result stability. Mistake 6. Evaluating result only by scale. Weight maintenance is primarily normalization of metabolic parameters. Fasting insulin, HOMA-IR index, postprandial glucose level, C-reactive protein. If the scale holds, that's good. But if metabolism remains disrupted, this is unstable maintenance. At the first provocation, weight will go back up. Now, what works for keeping weight from returning? This is a fundamentally different task compared to weight loss itself. First, gradual, not abrupt exit from deficit. This is possibly the most important and most ignored step in weight loss. About how to lose weight, thousands of books have been written. About how to correctly exit a diet, almost nothing. Although exactly this step determines whether the result will be permanent or temporary. After reaching the goal, not now everything is possible, but staged caloric increase. The body must adapt to the new nutrition level without creating a sharp surplus. This is exactly that, resetting the weight set point. It takes months, not days. Exactly slow exit from the deficit gives a chance to shift the metabolic setting toward the new weight. Second, work with glycemic load, not just calories. Reduced insulin sensitivity, the main quiet enemy of weight maintenance. After weight loss, it remains partially disrupted. Nutrition with low glycemic load, less fast carbohydrates, more fiber, protein at the beginning of each meal, this is direct influence on insulin response. Exactly this approach helps maintain weight without constant strict deficit. Third, strength training to restore metabolism. One of the main factors in reduced basal metabolism during weight loss of muscle tissue. Strength training restores muscle mass and thereby raises daily caloric expenditure. Important detail, with weight loss without strength training and without adequate protein, about 30 to 40% of lost weight may be muscle mass, not fat. This means after weight return, the body composition becomes worse. More fat, less muscle. Metabolism works more slowly. That's exactly why each subsequent diet cycle is harder than the previous one. This is literally metabolic repair, more long-term than any diet. Muscles burn energy even at rest. More muscle mass, higher basal metabolism, easier to maintain weight without strict restrictions. Fourth, reduce systemic inflammation through nutrition. An anti-inflammatory diet is not a temporary diet. It's a permanent strategy. Fatty marine fish 2 to 3 times a week, olive oil as main fat source, turmeric as spice or supplement, green leafy vegetables, berries, nuts. All this reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines of fatty tissue and improves its sensitivity to satiety signals. Without this, weight maintenance remains unstable. Fatty tissue continues influencing appetite toward overeating. Fifth, normalize cortisol and sleep. Chronic stress after a diet is a direct path to weight return. Cortisol increases appetite specifically for caloric food, stimulates fat deposition in the abdominal area, disrupts insulin sensitivity. Sleep less than 7 hours sharply raises ghrelin and reduces leptin, creating hormonal conditions for overeating. Quality sleep and stress management are not soft advice. They're direct tools of metabolic stability maintenance. There's one specific sleep metric worth tracking, not just number of hours, but constancy of wake time. The same wake time every day synchronizes the circadian rhythm and stabilizes cortisol levels. Exactly irregular sleep schedules, different on weekdays and weekends, is one of the factors of chronically elevated cortisol in people with inexplicable weight gain. Sixth, support for metabolic switches with nutrients. Here's an important part of the system. There are nutrients that work not through caloric deficit, but directly on cellular mechanisms managing insulin resistance and fatty tissue inflammation. Berberine is one of the most studied among them. It activates AMPK, adenosine monophosphate kinase, the key metabolic regulator called the master of metabolism. About the specific product in the next section. It's important to say honestly here, nutrients don't replace nutrition and lifestyle. Berberine with curcumin, this is support of an already built system, not a replacement for the system. They work when the rest is in place. That's why section 6 about lifestyle comes before the section about product, not the other way around. Now specifically about Now Foods berberine glucose support and why exactly this is relevant for the task of maintaining weight. Berberine is an alkaloid found in a number of plants, in particular barberry and golden seal. This is one of the most researched natural substances with metabolic effects, more than 2,000 clinical studies, which is unusual for plant nutrients. Main mechanism of berberine, AMPK activation. What does this mean practically? AMPK, adenosine monophosphate kinase, is an enzyme that works as an energy sensor in the cell. When AMPK is activated, the cell switches to efficient fuel burning mode, fat oxidation intensifies, fat and cholesterol synthesis decreases, cell sensitivity to insulin rises. This is exactly the switch that works poorly with insulin resistance, and exactly what berberine acts on. Clinically, this manifests in several effects: reduction of fasting glucose levels, improvement of postprandial glycemic response. After eating, sugar rises less sharply, reduction of insulin levels, decrease in formation of new fat cells. Berberine inhibits adipogenesis. According to a number of studies, berberine in terms of HbA1c reduction is comparable to metformin. This is a direct comparison in randomized studies, not a metaphor. With this, berberine has a significantly better tolerability profile. It doesn't cause the typical side effects of metformin from the gastrointestinal tract. This isn't a diabetes treatment replacement, but it's a very significant nutrient for people with insulin resistance and disrupted carbohydrate metabolism. An important berberine effect directly related to weight return. It improves gut microbiome composition. Berberine increases the number of Akkermansia muciniphila, a bacterium associated with normal weight, good glycemic control, and intestinal barrier health. This is a completely different level of influence than simply lowering blood sugar. Akkermansia muciniphila is one of the most studied metabolic bacteria. In people with obesity and glycemic disruption, it's significantly less than in people with normal weight. Its restoration improves the intestinal barrier and reduces the entry of inflammatory substances from the intestine into the bloodstream, which directly affects systemic inflammation and insulin resistance. Now about curcumin, and why it's in this combination, not separately. Curcumin is the active component of turmeric. Its main action in the context of weight maintenance, it suppresses inflammation in fatty tissue. Specifically, it reduces NF-κB activity, the main regulator of the inflammatory response. Less inflammation in fatty tissue, it better regulates appetite and insulin sensitivity. The problem with curcumin in standard form, very low bioavailability, about 3 to 5% with regular intake. That's exactly why this product uses EC curcumin, a form with improved bioavailability. Berberine and curcumin enhance each other's action. Berberine works through the AMPK pathway, improving cell metabolism. Curcumin works through the NF-κB pathway, reducing inflammation. Both affect insulin resistance, but from different sides. Together, they create a more complete metabolic effect than separately. There's another important connection between these two components. Curcumin increases berberine bioavailability. It inhibits intestinal enzymes that break down berberine before it's absorbed. That's why combined forms work better than the same substances separately. Now Foods berberine glucose support, 90 soft gels, 500 milligrams berberine HCl per soft gel. Soft gel form for good bioavailability. How to take? With food. This improves bioavailability of fat-soluble components. Berberine works best 20 to 30 minutes before a carbohydrate-containing meal. Exactly then its influence on glycemic response is maximal. What to expect and in what time time frame. Berberine works cumulatively. Improvement of glycemic control, gradually over 2 to 4 weeks. Stable effect on insulin resistance, over 8 to 12 weeks of regular intake. This isn't a weight loss pill. It's a nutrient that creates metabolic conditions under which maintaining new weight becomes physiologically more achievable. Who is this especially relevant for? People whose weight has already returned after previous weight loss attempts. Those with signs of insulin resistance, cravings for sweets 2 to 3 hours after eating, weight gain primarily in the abdominal area, elevated fasting blood sugar. People in the weight maintenance phase, when the goal has been reached but metabolic changes need to be consolidated. Link to Now Foods Berberine on iHerb, https://www.iherb.com/PR/now-foods-berberine-glucose-support-90-softgels/88818 in the description of this video. If weight returned, this doesn't mean the previous work was in vain. It means you solved only half the task, lost weight, but didn't reset the metabolic set point, didn't close insulin resistance, didn't extinguish fatty tissue inflammation. This is the other half, and it requires different tools. Good news, you already have proof that your body can weigh less. That's important. The second time isn't the first. You already know how the body reacts. The task now, not just to lose weight again, but to lose weight with simultaneous work on metabolic markers so the result becomes stable. 3 things worth doing. Get fasting insulin and HOMA-IR index. This will show how pronounced the insulin resistance is. Restructure the diet exit, slowly, gradually, by 100 to 150 kilocalories per week, and add anti-inflammatory nutrients to your diet, through food or supplements. Most likely, this time you already know what to do differently. This is no longer starting from zero. This is a restart with experience.